Holly. That's the favorite Tea Party song, and we really appreciate that rendition. Morgan, thank you so much. Hartsville, Miss Hartsville team. Our next speaker, the candidate for Superintendent of Education, Gary Burgess. And Gary, we invite you to take the stand. 7 minutes. I'll wave my hand.
Good afternoon. How are you doing? How are y'all doing today? How are y'all doing today? There is a destiny that makes us brothers and sisters. None goes this way alone. All that was sent into the lives of others will certainly come back into our own. I'm Gary Burgess, running for State Superintendent of Education. First of all, I want to thank my wife, Quinn, for running around the state with me. She's acting as my official, unofficial campaign manager. Give her a round of applause. Why am I running for State Superintendent of Education? Like you, I believe that we've been taxed enough already. That we can be the #1 learning environment in the world if we allow teachers to teach, get rid of unnecessary regulations, practices, and tests, and allow teachers to do what they need to do. We have some of the best teachers in the world, but the lowest student achievement because of regulations that make absolutely no sense. Why am I running for State Superintendent of Education? I believe that we can make a difference. It's not where a kid gets an education, it's that a kid gets an education. A well-educated kid benefits the public. I support parental choice with taxpayer money following the child. We have folk that argue about that. But I know that a well-educated kid who graduates from a private school benefits us much more economically than a high school, public school dropout. And we need to send that message forward. Why am I running for State Superintendent of Education? I am running for State Superintendent of Education because I am tired of South Carolina being the last in everything. We are resilient people. We are smart people. We can make a difference. That's why I'm running for State Superintendent of Education. I don't know how many of you have kids in the public school or you have grandchildren in the public schools. Does anyone out there have anyone in the public school system? In the elementary school and middle school? They give a test, and the tests that we give are bogus. They give us bad information. A Democratic candidate made contact with me saying, Garrett, I want you to sign President Obama's Race to the Top. I refuse to sign it. Let me tell you why I refuse to sign the Race to the Top money. One, it's new money for new programs. Will not do anything for our existing current financial condition. Secondly, that program will close schools that are labeled failing on bogus tests, bogus information. We open those schools as charter schools, only hiring up to 50% of the existing staff. Again, blaming the teachers rather than blaming the beast. The beast is the system itself. We need to change the system itself. Why am I running for State Superintendent of Education? This is my first time to beautiful Hartsville, South Carolina. But my son attends a governor's school for the arts and humanities in Greenville, South Carolina. And I'm running for that young man. Why am I running for State Superintendent of Education? I have a 12-year-old daughter who is an honor student in her middle school. That's why I'm running for State Superintendent of Education. I want her to get a great education. I have an 11-year-old son, like his daddy, works hard, but just an average Joe who needs to get a great education. That's why I'm running for State Superintendent of Education. Let me give you a personal story. And I don't know why we can't educate kids now. Here's my personal story. I'm adopted. The dad that adopted me is not my biological father. He had an 8th grade education. My mom a 12th grade education. He worked in the mills in upstate South Carolina. He and I and my older brother picked peaches in the summertime in order to help the family. My mother worked as a short order cook. My grandmother raised us in the home. I often tell people I had a drug problem. Is that my grandmother was a drug dealer. She drugged me to church, drugged me to school, she drugged me to God. Some of you know what I'm talking about. And my first 4 years of school, I went to an all-black school in Inman, South Carolina. Keep this in mind. My parents knew I was ready to go to school, not because I was tested, but because I turned 6 years old. I walked through the door of the school. 4 years later, we're integrating the school system in Inman, South Carolina. 7 years later, the little girl in my first grade class, that school they said was inferior, the teachers were inferior. She had no dad in the home. Mom was a short order cook. She graduated valedictorian of that class. We took the top 10 to 20% of every award in that class. Here's my point. Today, what do we do to children? When they come to school, we test them. The kids that are behind, we say we're going to teach you, but we're going to teach you like you're behind. When do we ever catch those kids up? Never, ever catch those kids up. We need to get rid of things that do not work. I was with a group last night that said it was a bipartisan group, but I was in Hartsville, South Carolina. Majority black, majority Democrat. And the Democratic opponent got up and said, we were excited when we got Dick Riley's 1-cent sales tax for schools. I got up behind him and said, what did we get for the 1-cent sales tax? We're still last in almost everything in education. Money will not solve our problem if we believe that poor kids cannot learn. Poor kids can learn. I learned. Many of you grew up poor. We can learn. Why am I running for state superintendent of education? I'm the only candidate in the field that's a product of the public schools of South Carolina, a native of South Carolina. The only candidate that has worked in real schools, turning real schools around as a teacher, as a principal, as a superintendent. Finally, I say this, why am I running for state superintendent of education? As a superintendent of school, the job that paid me the most, but was the least effective. You can get rid of every superintendent in this state and not miss a beat, because authority needs to be returned to the classroom teacher and to the principal. When I was principal, I learned one thing. Rather than get permission, get forgiveness. And we turned a school around that was in the bottom of everything in less than a year, the teachers and I. Now, one of my teachers here that's homeschooling their kid in Hartsville, where are you? One of my teachers just walked up and she spoke to me. Why am I running for state superintendent of education? I believe that we need to educate our public. I've been saying this on the trail and on the stump everywhere I go. When I become state superintendent of education, one thing I'm going to insist on is that we have in middle school or in high school in 9th grade a course called Southern History. Let me explain. The Democrats are trying to hijack a vote again by talking about the Confederate battle flag. When I talked to folks, they don't understand that the Confederate battle flag, I had people to fight on both sides of the war. Blacks, not because they loved slavery, but because they loved the South. It was the only home that they knew. I tell folk that slavery existed longer under the U.S. flag than it did under the Confederate flag. But the Confederate flag, battle flag, is not the national flag. The national flag of the Confederacy, we don't even know what it looks like. I know what it looks like. Many of you know what it looks like. But we are raising that issue to keep people fighting so that we will take our eyes off of the real issue in South Carolina. What was it, 10 years ago? 50,000 people showed up at the State House to move the flag from the State House to the state grounds. They said they won. They're still fighting about it. Why are we still fighting about something that has been settled? We're fighting because folk who are powerful, black and white, in this state want to keep folk ignorant and fighting each other and not work together to educate every one of our children and to say it's time to break the government dole. It's time to stop the handout programs. It's time to educate every kid. Now, we've got to educate every kid, and I've taken that stand. And people ask me, like I was asked coming up here, why are you a Republican? I am a Republican because that's the original party of black folk. Is that not correct? I am a Republican because I do not believe that the government can take care of me better than I can take care of me. I come to the Tea Party because I know I've been taxed enough already. If you keep me and let me have my tax money, I could probably support 2 or 3 families on my own that I choose to support. I've been taxed enough already. The Boiling Springs Tea Party has endorsed me. The Seneca Tea Party has voted in my favor. What I'm trying to say is this. If we want to change education in South Carolina, we cannot send someone to South Carolina into the State Department who's going to do the same old stuff over and over again. I'm going to work with folk, but I'm going to use the State Department as a bully pulpit to shine a light of day on what is going on in Columbia and to educate